Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the stories by our military veterans. Get yourself ready. It's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox.
Monitor doesn't want to hear it. Hey, wait till your number comes up. I'll get to you. About 2 months later, finally get the call. Say, hey, I got something in 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines for you. You want it? I'm like,
Nice.
absolutely. So I'm ready to go to 3-6. I was getting real close down to the wire. I'm about a week out, and I bump into a guy named First Sergeant Pointer, who had Brad Pointer, who'd been down at Paris Island with me, and I see him, and he goes, "Hey, man, congratulations on selection." I said, "Thanks, First Sergeant." Or at that point, he's a Sergeant Major, and I said, "Appreciate it, Sergeant Major. Thanks a lot." He goes, "Man, too bad about your orders, though." I'm like, "What?" He goes, I had heard you were going 3-6, but then today, I was talking to the 6th Marine Regiment Sergeant Major, and the guy from 1-6 had you pulled over there. I'm like, I hadn't heard that. He's like, "Yeah, you better go call the monitor." So I went back, called the monitor, and yeah, sure as hell, I got orders over to 1-6, and so a week later, I execute my orders, go over there, and start to check in. And I'm walking in the battalion building. The first person I see is the battalion gunner, who was a hat with me, uh, Gunner Tagliboo, and so that was a great little homecoming. And then I walk into the office, and I looked at the sergeant, the chain of command board, and the sergeant major is Brad Pointer. I'm like, all right, I got
He
you.
was playing games with you.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
yeah. He had his little fun. So I walked in, and kind of good reunion there. And I told him I appreciated him bringing me over. He goes, "Hey, I like to know who I have working around me." So he goes, "Well, I saw the opportunity to pull you over here. We deploy first, so we had priority." I'm like, okay, awesome. And so I got assigned to Alpha Company, and we went to CAX probably just about a month and a half after I got there, and had a pretty fun little vignette with Sergeant Major Pointer there. We're sitting up on Machine Gun Hill as the company's executing Range 400, company in attack. And so we're watching everything going on, talking and talking. And he goes, "Ham, what was your MOS?" I'm like, "I was in the band for Sergeant Major." He's like, "No, you weren't." I'm like, "Yeah, I was." He's like, "Bullshit." I'm like, "Sergeant Major, I'm not lying." He goes, "Man, whenever anybody asks me that, I tell them I was in the band just to fuck with them." So it was a pretty good, pretty funny story. And we're sitting there, and he's still looking at me. He's like, "You're not shitting me." I'm like, "No, I was a drummer." So it was a pretty funny story there. And um, the same kind of reaction was what I got from my platoon sergeants when I first walked in. I walked in the
Yeah.
office there, and originally I got where I was going with Charlie Company, and the Alpha Company Gunny was one of my former students at the academy. So he had seen me checking the battalion and was a little bit disappointed I wasn't coming Alpha. Um, and he was telling all the other, um, platoon sergeants about me, and the fact that I was going to Charlie instead of coming to them. And so when I got redirected and they said, "Hey, take Alpha," I walked on down the office and said hey to the gunny and said, "Hey, I'm now assigned here." And at that point, you see all the four platoon sergeants kind of looking and trying to figure out, all right, this is the band guy. What's he going to be like? And so it was definitely a, learning experience for everybody. They weren't sure what they were getting. And, I was trying my best to make sure they were getting everything they should be getting. So,
Right. Yeah. So I real quick, I want to recap something. So you were meritorious corporal, meritorious sergeant,
mhm,
and meritorious gunny.
yeah.
Yeah, but staff sergeant, you were just regular selection.
Yep. So I'd gotten down to Paris Island in '98, or not, end of '97 for school, and started picking up platoons in '98. And when the staff sergeant selection board went that year, um, that's the year I got selected for staff sergeant, and just through the
Got it.
normal board process. Yep.
Okay. So really you were fast tracking
Oh yeah, yeah.
pretty good through there. So when
Mhm.
you got selected for first sergeant, like what year are we talking in the Marine Corps?
Like, I selected just over. It was around 12, my 12th years when I
Okay.
pinned on first sergeant. So yeah, it was definitely fast track, and that was another thing that platoon sergeants were like, "Hmm, he's not that old." So, uh, but it was, it definitely put me in a position where uh, I was definitely more willing to listen than someone who might have been a little bit more seasoned and
Right.
set in their ways. And so I think it benefited everybody when we went to Iraq and Afghanistan. So we were able to uh, we tried to innovate as best we could every chance we got when it came to how we did things, and with
Mhm.
policy and stuff like that we put in place.
Right on. Yeah, that makes sense. And did you find that going from the band, going to first sergeant route,
Mhm.
uh, was that challenging for you? Because you're having to deal with that. There's always a stigma with the
Mhm.
band, anyways.
Yep.
But did you find that challenging at all?
So not as much as I think I would have if I would have come from somewhere else other than the academy. But being at the academy, on the career course deck, I used to teach the offensive defensive package, where I would take the whole
Right.
class to the cast trainer, spend 3.5 days with them, um, going through mag taffing attack and defense. Um, when I moved to the sergeant's course there, obviously part of the sergeant's course curriculum used to entail weapons handling, and
Right.
dis and ass of all the different machine guns and everything else organic to a company. And so having all those skills and all that knowledge from there, going to an infantry battalion, that definitely translated right over. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
early on during CAX, as we're walking around, and I'm still new to the company at that point, they didn't know what to expect fully, but we're walking around, and one of my machine gun teams was having a problem with a Mark 19. They you know it was stuck on. I said, hey, hold on a second. So I got down there, got it unjammed, and fixed it for them. And they're just kind of like looking at me like, who is this guy? I thought he was in the band, so it
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
got some credibility there. Um, and I was a martial arts instructor, and that's
Mhm.
what I initially hoped for my quota before I became the drill master. And so I continued doing the training throughout my whole time down there. So I got to do a lot of that kind of training with the company, especially while we're out at places like CAX, or when we're offsite in AP Hill later on before the next deployment. So
Right.
those kind of things all help build credibility pretty quick. So.
Yeah, very good. I would say it's definitely on the individual
Mhm.
and how you look at it and how you go into it. So I mean, obviously you had a good mindset walking into it, so it, set you up for success, which is great.
Mhm.
Uh, so tell me a little bit about your time with what'd you say, 1-6, right?
Mhm.
So with 1-6, and that's a storied battalion
It
in
is.
itself. Yeah. So kind of talk us through a little bit of that.
So we went to Ramadi, Iraq first. It was the summer of 2006, and in September there. So a couple months after Los Angeles Times had called Ramadi the worst place on earth.
Yeah.
And our battalion commander, Bill Journey, phenomenal. And a guy who, although he's super technically and tactically proficient, he's also super willing to listen to his commanders and also listen to the Marines, who are out there doing it. So, I mean, several times during the course of the deployment there, if he saw me or saw my Marines, he'd call us over and say, "Hey, what are y'all seeing? What's the biggest thing that's keeping your company awake right now?" and stuff like that. And one time in particular, me and one of my platoon, he was a gunny serving as a platoon commander. We were short on lieutenants. We were back. Where the main battalion was, rather than out with the company for a meeting, and came by to see Sergeant Major. He wasn't there, but the battalion commander asked, pointed at a map and said, "Hey, where would you guys go next?" And the Gunny and I had just been talking about that, a day earlier. I said, "Hey, Gunny, tell him what we talked about yesterday." And so he kind of sketched out kind of his dream op for the next thing to
Yeah.
do, and something that we had all talked about as a company. And a week and a half later, we got the clearance to do it. So,
Wow.
yeah, that was the
Very
kind of
cool.
guy that Bill Journey was. And today's we're in 3 stars. He's the Marine Forces Indo-PACOM CG. So just phenomenal seeing him continue to rise and to the level where he's at today. Um, but it was, being in that battalion, we had a lot of experience there. That was the battalion commander's second deployment with the battalion, which is a little bit unheard of. And so a lot of the staff had actually extended to stay with him. And so we had a lot of good experience on the staff. So the company got a good amount of support. Um, our biggest threats at the time were IEDs. We lost some folks early
Mm.
on, wounded to some IEDs, and the sniper threat was pretty serious as well. That's of our 4 KIA during the deployment. 3 of them were attributable to snipers.
No
Um,
kidding. Wow.
so it was definitely a steep learning curve. We had our procedures locked on tight, whether it be patrolling or whether it be, getting the Kazovacs. We had a mobile platoon that we did a support starboard um, Kazovac crew with. And so, it was definitely a hard deployment early on to take the kind of casualties we did. But it was rewarding in that it was right as the awakening was happening. Um,
Hmm.
and so we went from 70 to 100 SIGACs a week for the battalion when the first couple months we were there, September through December, through after March 1st. We didn't take any fire for the last 2 months we were there. Now, we were patrolling
Wow.
everywhere, doing all the same things, and we just weren't getting any contact, no IEDs. And so Petraeus came to see us at one point, and because we'd had nothing, he decided he wanted to walk around without his helmet on. So obviously, all of us that were on satellite patrolling around him, we had to do the same thing. And so it was definitely one of those. I hope this works out. You know. So
Yeah. A possible pucker factor moment right
yep.
there.
But
Uh,
Ramadi didn't see. Wasn't until October. We left in May of '07 or yeah '07, and it wasn't until October of '07 when there was another casualty taken in Ramadi with some of the folks that came in behind us, some of the units that had rotated in later. So it was, you know,
wow.
definitely
That's
rewarding.
incredible.
And I think when you hear folks talk today about PTSD, I think a contributing factor anytime you talk about PTSD is that feeling that what you did didn't matter. You have all this loss. You have all these folks that are hurt or dead or things left undone, and there's no closure there. I think that is a contributing factor, in my opinion. It's an experience. Um, but for the Marines to see the turnaround that they did in Ramadi, I think helped in a lot of ways to reduce the number and incidence rates that you saw within at least with our company of folks that had issues later on. I mean, it wasn't zero. We definitely had some issues, but a
Right.
lot less incident rate of that.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I've never really put that into perspective, but I think that's a very good way of looking at it when it comes to PTSD. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is very interesting. Has there been a study on that or at all? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge. I, I don't know. I would have to go research that one.
Yeah.
Maybe something to put on my to-do list. The
There you go.
I'll
There you
always
go.
look for the next thing to write about. Um, but it was definitely, we did take a, hard loss in between that deployment and the next one. One of our Marines did commit suicide, and
Mm.
you know, he had a lot of personal stuff going on. Um, and in addition to that, one of the things we got back from his mom, who he didn't have a good relationship with, was she had a letter from him stating that he had saw something or done something, and she felt that was contributing. Can't say if it's true or not. Don't
Yeah.
know. But we had some lumps afterwards, from maybe PTSD related, who knows? But no way
Yeah.
to tell.
Mm.
Um, but
Yeah.
we
That's
came back. Oop, go ahead.
so I was going to say that the whole suicide thing, especially with the veteran community, is, I think the latest was 22 a day.
Mhm,
So I mean, that's a tough thing to get a handle on, if you
mhm,
will. But a lot of great resources out there, and I talk
mhm.
about it
There
after
are.
every podcast. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Where what you were saying?
Oh yeah, it just it was. Um, there's no way of telling where it came from, but it was definitely a hard lump. Especially, um, we'd been extended for 2 months on that deployment, as part of the surge in Iraq.
Mm.
So we came back and 9 months back to go ahead and refit. We were supposed to be on the MEU next. And so we were with the 24th MEU. We got word that, contrary to the trend up to that point, usually it was Charlie Company had Helo Company, as long as anybody can remember, with 1-6. But we got the word that Alpha was going to have Helo Company, which was great. And so we started working up. We did all our pre-deployment workups with the MEU, as the Helo Company. And next, got word right after the new year in 2008 that, you know what, we're going to have a surge in Afghanistan now, and 1-6, you're no longer going to float, you're going to fly over, you're going to Afghanistan. So okay, here we go. And so we went over. The MEU went over. Obviously we didn't
Mhm.
float over. The whole MEU flew. But we had all the MEU resources, which was phenomenal, because we were in Garmser in the Helmand province, and to our west, 2-7 was over there as just a straight leg battalion, without all the assets that came along being part of the MEU, or the MEU's BLT.
Right.
So no engineer support, no aviation support, all the other stuff that comes along
Wow.
with it, with having the CLB with us. And you know, we relieved a British unit had been in the area and had left before we got there. And initially, the plan for us was, we got there at Kandahar, got acclimated, and the word was, hey, we're gonna go ahead, gonna fly into Garmser and then push south, reopen Rhino, and who knows what after that. Well, we flew into Garmser. I think it was the night of April 1st, like April Fool's Day, the midnight April Fool's Day, 2008. We went in first because we were the Helo Company and secured the zone, and then Bravo Company flew in behind us, into the zone that we had secured and moved to their position. Then we packed up and moved south to ours. Charlie took trucks into the northern part of Garmser, and that's how they made their ingress. And we got there, and for the next probably 30 days, the enemy, the Taliban there, they weren't happy we were there, and they kept on attacking. So we just kept on, we kept staying, and
Wow.
giving them the
Man.
business. So we ended up staying in Garmster for about 3.5 months. It was supposed to be a 5 to 7 day op, and we were there for about 3.5 months.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So about 2 weeks in, all the company gunnies from the different companies were pulled back to the Kandahar to go ahead and grab everybody's sustainment bags that everybody had left behind, because 5 to 7 days
Yeah.
we weren't worried about it, and they brought all that stuff down. But yeah,
Holy
we
cow.
were there for a while. So
Hmm.
so that deployment, then, as we were starting to get near the end, we got word that, once again, we're gonna go ahead and um, surge, continue the surge. So we're gonna go ahead and extend your deployment once again. So we had another 45 days in Afghanistan, over what we initially expected. So that was, you know, uh, kind of a kick. But for the folks that had been in Iraq beforehand with us, they kind of knew what to expect, and were like, they took it a little bit better, I think, than most other
Yeah.
people would have.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of is a little bit of kick in the gut there. An extra 45 days when you're like, oh, it's time to go home.
Yeah,
Oh,
see
no,
the
it's
light.
not. Yeah. Oh, man. And total then your whole time over there was what, 7, 8 months?
So we were in Iraq almost 9, and we were in Afghanistan between 7 and 8 months.
Okay. Wow.
So
And then once you finish with that deployment, you come back. So you spent now 3 years, 3+ years there with 1-6.
It was right around 3 at that point, and went on a cruise when I came back, and while I'm on the cruise, I powered up when down in the Caribbean, powered the phone up, and so I had a message from a Quantico-based area code. I'm like, uh-oh. So I listened to the message, and it's the monitor. He said, "Hey, I need you to pick 3 duty stations at Camp Lejeune because you'll probably be in zone next year. So I'm not going to move you anywhere else. But you can't stay at 1-6 anymore, longer. Somebody else has to have their turn, get their opportunities." So, I gave him my list of 3. Last one on there was SOI. Uh, since it was, an engineer school, something else in SOI. And so gave him those, came back. All right, you're going to SOI. I'm like, all right. So I show up at SOI, and I get what then was called Student Admin Company, SAC Company. And so you had the
Okay.
camp guard, you had the grad hold, you had the folks on medical rehab, medical separations, legal separations. All your, everyone's bottom 10% was basically your 100%. And it was challenging. We did 93 court martials over that year. Right? So again,
Holy cow.
again with the legal folks, that part of that was the folks that had already popped positive, and then
Uh,
when I showed up, the legal platoon was 17 or 18 strong, and some of them had been there for 4 months, 5 months, and so if you're in a holding pattern 4 or 5 months, there's not a whole lot that you're worried about, you know
yeah.
nobody telling you. So they were just predisposed to doing other things and additional misconduct that was going to get them even deeper trouble. So yeah,
Right. Yeah.
93 court martials. We had hundreds of NJPs total. It was just, a reflection mainly of the population we had, and then the fact that you're in that entry level environment. Underage drinking, you were
Oh
getting
yeah.
word of that because they were out doing dumb stuff and getting caught and, picked up. So they weren't good at hiding what they were doing. So
Yeah.
it made sharpened my skills for the admin stuff up even more. Um, but at the end of
Yeah.
that year, I got selected for sergeant major, and you know, waited for orders. When the monitor finally called, he said, "Hey, I got something for you." And I'd requested Japan. I said I didn't care what I got, but I'd like to go to Japan. And I said, "I got something for you in Oki." I'm like, "Okay." He said, "VMGR 152. I need you there in March or January." I'm like, "All right, got it." We hung up, and then I went to the computer and Googled VMGR. What is that? And it turned out
Right.
being a C-130 squadron. So
Okay.
yeah. So at the
Wow.
time, the Sumos were still on Okinawa. They were actually on Kadena at that time because Fatema was getting resurfaced. And so I
Okay.
checked in aboard Kadena for the first 3 months. Was in a temporary office, but it was actually beneficial. It was advantageous because it was my office, and there's a door out to the hallway, but then another door led into our maintenance chief's office, the master guns. And
Okay.
so a guy named Eric Hammerquist, who's just a phenomenal professional, and throughout those first 3 months that we were there, he was able to kind of give me a crash course on all things, maintenance for aviation, and
Yeah.
so um, there weren't very many days when that door was closed between our two offices. No matter if he had somebody counseling him in his office or if I had somebody in my office, most times that door was open. And usually if there was something in one of our offices that was, you know, intense or whatever, afterwards, we'd walk next door, whoever it was, and have a discussion and conversation. And man,
Right.
it made us, we were lockstep. And so, I mean, it's always beneficial in any unit when you have all your senior enlisted kind of on the same page like that. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Most definitely.
yeah, so it was good that first 3 months was there. Then we moved back over to Fatema, where our offices were a little bit farther located away from each other, and made it a little bit harder for us to uh, to to exchange the ideas we did as easily as we did over in
Mm.
Kadena. But it was a good tour. I got to go a lot of places with the Sumos. Um, we had at the time a rotating detachment in Afghanistan. The East Coast and West Coast squadrons of 130s would keep 4 birds there. We would keep 2, so there were 6 planes total servicing Afghanistan for the Marine Corps. And so every 3 to 4 months, we do a tail swap and take in 2 fresh birds, take out 2 birds, and
Oh,
it
wow.
also give the CO and I a chance to see the Marines that were out there on their detachment, and make sure everything was going well, and look in on them and get them wherever they needed. So
Wow. And you said that happened every couple of months, 3 months?
yeah, every 3 or 4 months. Usually we take 2 birds in, leave 1, take out whichever of their birds was in the roughest shape. And so they
Mhm.
kept they would keep 2 birds there, and then it'd give us an opportunity to, whichever one was in the worst shape, get that rehabbed a little bit back on Okinawa, closer to the supply chain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty smart. And then so you spent 3 years or 2 years, 2 or 3 years there?
Yeah, so at the time, it was a 3-year tour, and the wing sergeant major at the time wanted everyone to rotate through at least 2 units. So basically, at a
Okay.
year and a half, he was kind of rotating people. I ended up moving next down the flight line to a CH-46 squadron next, the Flying
Okay.
Tigers, and
Yeah.
so that was uh, so that unit ended up being my second one there in Okinawa, and great unit. It was the last 46 squadron in Okinawa, so we were the last 46 MEU. Uh, as we were out on the MEU 265, our sister squadron was transitioning the Osprey, and then when
Mm.
we got back from that, our transition period began to the Osprey. So, but
Wow.
on the heels of that deployment, and that was so we were out the 31st MEU over that year, doing the normal kind of spring and fall patrols, and then additional exercises with the MEU. But we had 2 different mishaps happen while we were out there. We had our XO and one of the other pilots. They were doing a pinnacle landing, and one of the trees that had under power had bent down on the prop wash as they made the pinnacle and left off power a little bit. One of the trees swung back up, clipped the rotor while they're on this cliff, and it was through sheer skill that they were able to kind of pull the thing back over onto itself and land on this ledge, a couple 100 feet up. Everyone
Wow.
survived. Yeah, everyone survived. Total loss of the aircraft, but everybody was able to get evac'd out of there and made it. And um, but
That's
it
a
was definitely,
miracle.
oh yeah, yeah. But we had that one, and then in Thailand, or that was in Thailand. In the Philippines, we had a crew that was coming in with infantry in the back. They were making a landing, and the field had some holes in it, some what would look like a pothole, but with the grass you
Right.
couldn't see it. So when they came down, 3 of the wheels were level, 1 wheel went into a hole,
Oh, right.
and yeah, and so the bird rolled. Luckily, again, everyone was able to get out. No injuries, no major injuries on that one, thankfully. And but so that was a rough cycle there.
Yeah.
But
Now I
the end of it,
imagine being in the air wing and everything, I mean, if there's a mishap, there is all kinds of inspections and they're going over everything with a fine tooth comb.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty wild.
Yeah. After the first, so we were the previous year, we were the HMM of the year, and we also won the safety award for the Marine Corps that year. And so after the first mishap, they had to do the investigation. Nothing, no findings or anything like that. It was just a you know mishap. After the second one, though, at that point, my CO at the time was like, nobody has 2 mishaps and survives. So we kind of knew
Yeah.
it was coming, but he ended up being relieved, and
Oh, wow.
so that was hard for the squadrons. That was, for me, that was a challenge, because um, total, much respect for that commander. He was phenomenal Marine, phenomenal pilot, phenomenal human being. And to see the aftermath of that second mishap, as you said, when the fine tune comb came out, and even though they didn't find anything the first time, there was still nothing to find. But the attitude of the investigation was 100% different on that next one, and
Yeah.
the characterizations of his leadership that they made afterwards really left a uh, a bad feeling in a lot of people's,
Yeah.
mouth. So
Mm. That's
it was,
unfortunate. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but right around that time, the Marine Corps had advertised the opportunity for two sergeants major the following year to attend command and staff college for the Marine Corps. And
Yeah.
so, I put in for it. I'd done a bachelor's and a master's in night school previous to that. And so I put in for it, and I was one of the two guys selected. So that summer, after that, as my 3 years was up, I PCS'd to Quantico. And for that next year, I was a student going through command and staff college with a bunch of majors and captains.
Well, that's a big deal. I mean, you're kind of briefing over it,
Mhm.
but that's really a big deal. It's enlisted folks going to that academy, or not school, not academy, but yeah, that's a big deal. So kind of talk to us a little bit about that experience.
Uh, so I thought it was a hell of a program. It was at the time Brigadier General Bill Mullen, that had the idea. When he'd attended the Naval War College as a lieutenant colonel, the Navy for years had a policy where their master chiefs could apply and attend the War College if selected. And to his point of view, having a senior enlisted perspective in there as they were doing, planning, as they were, reviewing different historical case studies and making comments and thinking about it, having that other perspective is just as beneficial as having the ally perspective or the civilian agency perspective that are inherent in all these JPME schools.
Right.
And so when he became the president of the university, he said, "I'm going to bring enlisted folks into command and staff," and so he did. Yeah, it was his call as the president, so he went ahead and did it. So we were the first year of that, and it went on for about 5 or 6 years, and was popular enough with the director of the command and staff college that he'd asked to expand it. He wanted an enlisted guy in every one of the seminar groups. It
Oh,
got
wow.
I think the largest we had was, I think, seven. The last year was the largest we had. Never made it to the 15 or 16 groups. But the NDAA for, I think it was 2019, ended up specifically prohibiting enlisted folks attending a school that is funded with monies for JPME at that point. The Air Force had seen what
Mm.
we were doing, and the enlisted folks at the Marine Corps Command and Staff College had never taken a seat from an officer that needed it.
Right.
There was an overage. There was excess capacity there that they were taking advantage of that to have us there, and so there was nobody missing out. The Air Force tried to start it, and they had I think the second year they did it, they had an officer who didn't get promoted, who then said, "Well, I had asked for resident PME. I didn't
Oh,
get it, but they
no.
got an enlisted guy there, and why wasn't I afforded my resident PME to make myself more competitive?" And so after that, Congress came down and said no more enlisted at JPME schools. So that
Wow.
unfortunately that's an opportunity lost, because being able to share perspective with those future commanders, and also for senior enlisted to be able to talk to a whole swath of folks who are going to be those future commanders, and go through the same education and understand what they're being taught to be looking for, what they're being taught to consider and to be on guard for. That just makes you better senior enlisted.
Oh,
So it was
yeah.
definitely a two-way street where it was beneficial. But yeah, that program is no longer in effect.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I did not know that. That's pretty
yeah.
wild. Uh,
Uh, but then following that, Marine Corps is always good at starting programs, but not always good at planning for what comes next.
right.
Although McPP is a great tool, but you got to use it. So towards the last part of that year of school, um, you know, our sergeant major and I are looking for orders, and we caught the deer in the headlight look back at us. Oh, orders. Oops. So
We
we ended
forgot
up
about you.
spending, we ended up spending another 4 or 5 months attached to Marine Corps University in various capacities until they had orders for us. We both ended up
Wow.
slating for different things. I slated for the director of the Quantico Academy. He ended up slating as the academy director for out in Okinawa. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
spent the next year and a half, 2 years as the director of the Staff NCO Academy at Quantico. Um, and right around that time, the EPME Sergeant Major at that point, who's also the director for the Senior Enlisted Academy, so the First Sergeant's Course, Sergeant Major Course, and Senior Enlisted PME,
Right.
got tagged to go over to the Marine Corps University as its Sergeant Major. And so we were right in the middle of doing some updates to PME, and they asked, "Hey, would you want to move across and not slate, but move laterally and take that EPME job for a couple of years so there's some stability and have somebody that knows what we're doing, where we're coming from, where we're going." So I said, "Yeah." And so I spent the next 3 years, and then that took me to retirement as the director of the Senior Enlisted Academy, and it changed to CME, College of Enlisted Military Education, from EPME, Enlisted Professional Military Education Branch. So
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And then, so that took you, how many years total were you in?
just a little over 26.
26. Okay. Ah, very nice. So from the beginning to the end, right? Starting out as a drummer,
Hmm.
or I should say percussionist. I claim drummer. You may claim percussionist, but so starting out as a percussionist, working your way through meritorious promotions along the way. I mean, being able to be in a storied battalion, you know, 6 Marines, deploying with them twice,
Hmm.
and then the all of your education put together and culminating with the academies and
Hmm.
doing that. I mean, absolutely incredible career. That's pretty
Appreciate it.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So after hearing everything, you know, and as I said at the beginning, I've heard about you. You know, everyone in the band field talks about you. Oh yeah, you know, Scott Hamm, Scott Hamm, and I'm like, okay, yeah. But now I get it. I understand why everyone says Scott Hamm. So, whoa, kicked my camera there. But yeah, I thanks for coming on and telling your story, man. It's a very awesome story.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So
So real quick, as you look back over your career, is there words of wisdom, advice,
mhm.
anything like that that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Well, a always look for opportunities to do something different, and vary your experiences. It just makes you a better, well-rounded person, better perspective, better able to relate to folks. Always, they say never volunteer, but if you don't do that, you miss a lot of opportunities to influence folks, to improve yourself and things like that. And also pursue education. Just there's all kinds of programs that are out there, including, now I work for the USNCC, the United States Naval Community College, that serves Marines, sailors, and Coast Guardsmen, and that's a fully funded associate's degree with a pathway to a 4-year degree.
Mm,
And so education is out there. All you got to do is pursue it. It'll make you better at being a Marine, or whatever your
yeah,
service is, but it'll also, help you for later in life. So, always pursue that education when you can.
yeah, very nice. Well, talk a little bit about where you are now and what you're doing now.
All right. So I retired. I stayed here in Quantico. I loved enlisted education, so I went down. I talked to the distance education director about, hey, you got anything, in the enlisted distance education branch there, and they were looking for curriculum developers at the time. So they had an opening. So I stayed on for 4 years as a contractor, developing enlisted curriculum, the non-resident courses that you do before you go to the academies, and
Mm,
then over the last decade, we've brought online seminar courses for those that can't make the academy because whatever they're doing. There's it for the 7 weeks or 5 weeks. They have seminars where you go one night a week for 15 weeks, um, and go through a curriculum with similar education outcomes to the resident courses. And so, um, writing the curriculum for that as well. And then right towards the end, I worked on a blended seminar for E8s to replace the old regional E8 seminar, which, depending on where you're at, just really didn't do a whole lot for you other than like a troop information brief on steroids. Um, and while I did that for 4 years, when I went through command of staff, my civilian faculty advisor had gone through the University of Leeds over in the UK to pursue his PhD. And so he had a lot of great things to say about it. It's a great, well-known research university. And so as I was getting ready to retire, I had my kids late. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old now. And,
Yeah, I
but
feel
as
your
I was,
pain.
yeah, as I was retiring though, I had a 1-year-old and my wife, 1.5-year-old, and my wife was pregnant with our second. And since I had them so late, I didn't have the time to obligated time to give the GI Bill to them. So I said, well, I might as well use it. 26 years, I earned it.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and applied to the University of Leeds for their military history. Did my proposal, and they accepted the proposal I had for my PhD research, and spent 4 years conducting research and writing my thesis up, and got my PhD in last year. But just as I was finishing it up, the Naval Community College was starting to look for its professor of modern naval history. So, as I said, it was a fully funded course, and it just started 3 years ago. But the USNCC's mission is to provide an avenue for education for Marines, sailors, and Coast Guardsmen. And specifically, it's asynchronous, it's online, so you can do it anywhere in the world. Our students right now in my class spread from Japan, Hawaii, Spain. Last term, I had one that was in the Med,
Wow.
guarding against, or they were over there in the Med. They had previously been down off of Israel, helping down there.
Mm.
So the, our students are everywhere. But they also want us to be able to provide the instruction in a way that somebody that hasn't had a strong academic background can come in, and they can get the help when they need it. So we have a strong student services department and things like that they can help make sure people aren't getting scared away by the normal obstacles that are involved with enrolling in a civilian college.
Right.
So, but that's, I started that a year ago, well, a year and 3 months now. And so now I teach for them. Whenever I get a chance, I go out and speak to groups of Marines, telling the story of the USNCC, and tell them how they can help them. Every degree that is granted, there's 5 courses that are naval relevant education. So there's a leadership and ethics course. There's the modern naval history, force design, civil mil relations, and geopolitics. And so those by themselves are like a PME course on steroids.
Right.
And each one of those is an accredited three credit course recognized by slew of universities. And so they walk away with an associate's degree, but also 5 courses that were totally dedicated to improving their knowledge of the profession of arms and making them a better Marine or sailor. So,
wow. Yeah, that's a really good deal. I like that.
Yep. So yeah, it definitely went around when we were young, but
yeah,
definitely a benefit worth pursuing now.
Oh, for sure. Wow. I mean, you are the perfect example of getting your education and going through and doing those things, and proving that it can be done. Yeah, and you were able to do. You said your bachelor's and master's degree, basically doing nights. Which is incredible. So, yeah, it's possible. So you're living proof of that. So, yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Anything like that?
I can't think of anything. Maybe when we're done, kind of reminisce about some of the folks we know in common.
Yeah. We could do that for sure. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome hearing your story all the way through, and I'm sure all the listeners are going to love it as well. But to all the listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Remember, if you're struggling, you're thinking about hurting yourself, you're just having a rough go, the VA has some great resources out there. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can text 838-255, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on that chat icon. Any of those options are going to be able to get you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But one veteran life loss is one too many. I care about you. Scott cares about you. The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. With that, Scott, one last time, thanks for coming on. And to all the listeners out there, stay motivated, change your socks.